Okay. So I've given your papers back. We are working for our second week on our papers, exploring whether Antigone should have disobeyed Creon. Does anybody have a question or a comment or a concern about your paper? Are you having trouble finding material? Okay. You like that one better? I'll have to keep that in mind, because obviously I signed this before we'd read it. Expand. So for Matthew, Ethan's problem is that maybe the topic is a little narrow, so that you're having trouble maybe fleshing it out. And my advice in these situations would be just to broaden your search, so that, do you remember, oh, you didn't do it. So last year, those of you who did my high school class last year, do you remember that opening exercise where I made you write your letter pleased me greatly 150 different ways, or as many ways as you possibly could? This was an exercise that Erasmus did, and the idea was just to develop what he calls copiousness. You guys know copia means a supply in Latin. So copiousness means just a supply of words and ways to arrange them and ways to phrase them. So how many ways can you say that? So likewise, expand, your invention process to say, well, what is this related to? It's related to obedience to authority, isn't it? Well, now we can bring in, if we want to, other examples of obedience or disobedience to authority, and we can maybe get something from them, get a lesson from them that we can apply to this. We can also dive back into their past relationship. It's not directly related, but if we think about how Creon might be feeling about Oedipus's whole family, in the sense of the stain on their family because of what he did, that might affect how he feels about it. Explore the relationship, the fact that his son is engaged to Antigone. Does he feel good about that, bad about that? Well, I guess it's more about Creon than Antigone, but that you can take that for Antigone's perspective too. How does she? So if you dive into her feelings, maybe that takes you on a new track. Did she do this out of conviction, or did she do this from feeling partly? And then do we follow our feelings? And are her feelings for Creon? What are her feelings for Creon? How has she been treated? Do you know what I mean? I think you all know what I'm saying. That when you stumble like that, it's like, oh, I just don't have enough information. Don't be afraid to visit things that seem outside of the search. Do you know what I mean? Expand your search engine, whatever you're Googling for a wider thing. And it's okay if you have some proof paragraphs that are just a little on the light side sometimes, okay? If you can think of a strong reason, even if your supporting reasons for that are rather weak, the strong reason can hold itself up. Do you know what I mean? You can't really have a paragraph where you just say one sentence. You need to elaborate it a little, or it's not really a paragraph. But you know what I mean? If you have a zinger, like when we talk about should someone kill somebody, and a zinger one is thou shalt not kill. This is a zinger argument. Do you know what I mean? It's hard. I'm not going to argue with the 10 Commandments. So whatever you put as a supporting argument for that is like, yeah, whatever. You had me at thou shalt not kill. So if you can find ones that are like that, don't feel bad if your support seems weak. Also, if you have one that you can really, really support, it bolsters one that's lighter. Do you know what I mean? So most of the time, we're not going to have the perfect paper. And we have to be okay with that. We want it to be as good as we can. And usually if we sit and think about an issue, and then we put it away and we come back and think about it some more, we can think of new things. New things will occur to us. But it's okay. All right. But do you feel like you have enough? I mean, are you struggling, or do you feel like you have enough? Okay. Okay. I just want to remind you that we want to try to include both kinds of parallelism and antithesis. Right? Those were our three so far that we've. Antithesis being. Contrasting parallelism. That's exactly right. So if I want to say, you know, yeah, exactly. The cookies, the sweetness of the ice cream set off the slight bitterness of the dark chocolate chips within it. You see, and then we have the sweetness and anything like that, where two opposing or contrasting things set each other apart. All right. We obviously have a lot of contrast in this play. We have Antigone and Ismene have different attitudes. We have, you know, Eteocles versus Polynices. You know, there's ready-made antitheses of things that we can play off each other. All right. So everybody feels good? I don't ever want anybody to feel like you're drowning in a writing assignment. That should never happen. That means I didn't explain it well enough and you need more help. Okay. That's always on me, not on you if that happens.
So it helps that we feel like this is a college issue with moral things that are not about.
Yes, yes. No, it's okay. If you read persuasive essays, if you read essays that people write, sometimes they stray far from the basic point and they circle around to make their point, not Herodoteanly, but, you know.
Like, they try to get other words in there because they don't want to fight for their own thing. As in that point.
Yes.
And they're like, try to do this. What is the point to, like, off-topic words?
Yes. Yes. And sometimes we have to resort to tenuous support for but hopefully our goal is to have strong support. Okay, so our art of the week, I must apologize for. Okay, A, because he's not wearing any clothes. I always apologize for that. B, and so I won't pass it around. I'll have it up here if you want to see. I mean, do you want me to pass it around? Or would you rather I didn't? What? Nobody cares about my art, does they? You know what? I'll just keep it up here, and then if you want to, but I will recreate, except closed. I won't recreate it for you. This. Oh, did anybody go to Augustana and see the play? I know. I couldn't go for the same reason. So. I have one family that went to see the production of Medea at Augustana last weekend, and said it was really well done. It was really good. So the piece of art is called, I write it up here and then I just get in the way, don't I? It's called the Doryphorus. It means spear bearer. All right? And I don't know why, every single picture of this online is grainy. Like nobody with a good camera ever visits the statue. B, when I only had a small 4x6 made because it was so grainy. B, when I formatted it to print it out at Walgreens, like I chopped off his head. He has a head. You can see part of it. Anyway, this is the Doryphorus. And it's not going to seem like it is just amazing to you, probably, at first glance. Okay, he's standing. It's a guy and he's standing. But the idea is, and now I will do my recreation. Oh, and by the way, he's got a little tree stump behind him. What's that tell you? It's a Roman copy. It's a Roman copy of a Greek original. So this is by an artist. He's very famous, named Polyclitus. And he was a follower, a devotee of Pythagoras, who is near and dear to your heart, I'm sure, because of the Pythagorean theorem. We're so glad for the Pythagorean. No, we're not. You all look ecstatic over the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras was really a philosopher. I mean, he was a mathematician, but he was a philosopher too. And he thought everything was number. Like, if you could turn numbers into a cult, that's Pythagoras. And I mean, seriously, like a cult. They lived together and they had certain, standards. It was like a like a number monastery or something. I don't know. I can't even put this. And they believed in reincarnation. So the story is that once Pythagoras went into a museum and he saw a shield there, and it was supposed to have been held by Euphorbus, who fought in the Trojan War and is mentioned by Homer. And Pythagoras thought he was Euphorbus in a former life. He says he kind of dimly remembered carrying that shield. He thought he was a lady, too. I don't remember. Euphorbus is the only one I can remember. Anyway, they had past lives. This is the guy you use the theorem of for your right triangle, seriously. So Pythagoras had, everything was about number. And we know that numbers are important, not just, okay, hopefully math is not just utilitarian. Math is a mental discipline. And it is fascinating sometimes to see the mathematical proportions in nature. You know, the scales on a pine cone, the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, okay. Things like that are amazing, and it just gives you a sense of wonder. And so, but Pythagoras turned it into a, everything is based on number. Like number is God, sort of. And so Polyclitus said, I'm going to take Pythagoras' ideas of number and I'm going to use it, I'm going to make the perfect piece of art based on number and proportion. So like mathematicians and art scholars study the statue because measuring the proportions because they're all numerically, mathematically related to each other. And so this statue, he's got a foot in front and he's got his foot, back foot like this. Okay, so it's resting. And he's got this hand was holding, we assume, a spear because he was called the spear bearer. And they called him this in the ancient world. And we know about this piece of art. It's described. And his other arm's like this, down his side. So on the one hand, his left side is all flexed. Everything is bent. And the right side is straight. So this side looks, this side is a anchor, you know, as being all straight, and this side is askew. But then if you look at it opposite, if you stand like this, all my weight is on this leg, and this leg isn't really doing anything, right? It's just sort of keeping my balance. So this leg is relaxed, and this arm is relaxed. This arm is holding something, and this leg is carrying the weight. So we have activity like in a cross. So he kept all this in mind, and his idea was, I'm going to use the theories of Pythagoras to make the perfect statue. And this is what he came up with. This is a mathematical statue. And that is why I bring it in. It's very similar to some things that we've seen, but this is just the height of taking math and form and trying to combine them to make the perfect figure, presuming that would bring out perfect beauty, that would be a thing of perfect beauty, the Doryphorus. So I will leave it here if you want to look at the legs and the arms later. I also wanted to read something to you before we dig into the play. Something came up. Entertaining and educational things can sometimes happen on Facebook. I don't highly recommend Facebook, but sometimes something entertaining comes up. And this one I had seen before from a group that I follow. And it's actually from a book. This is a excerpt from a book by Matthew Wright, and it's called Euripides, Orestes. So this is versions of Orestes in plays we're not reading by Euripides, okay? Euripides wrote a play about Orestes traveling to the island of Taurus, where Iphigenia has been whisked away. This is the version where Artemis whisked her away at the last minute and substituted a phantom in her stead. And she's been living, serving the temple of Artemis at this island, Taurus, for all these years, so she never really died. This is one of the alternate versions. Yeah, and so, but unfortunately the rule on this island is they kill all strangers. Because they I don't know. They kill all strangers. So Orestes is there because he has to come get something from this island because Apollo told him to, like as part of his penance for... I don't know. Anyway, he comes and then they meet her, but they don't know it's her, and she gives her brother a letter and says, will you take this back to Greece? I have a brother and his name is Orestes, and Orestes' friend that starts with the letter P that came with him. No, I don't remember. Anyway, Pylades. Pylades came, and that looks fun. He gives them a letter, and he says, well, I'm Orestes. And so they have to figure out, it's a cape, now it turns into a rescue caper, how they smuggle her out, but she's supposed to be executing them because they're foreigners, but they've got a plan, you know, and they're going to work it out. Anyway, so there are plays by Euripides in which Orestes plays a part that we're not reading. And so this is a quote from this book by Matthew Wright. Most unusually, we happen to know the name of the actor who played the role of Orestes in the original production. He was called Hegelicus. This information is preserved purely because of an embarrassing mistake which Hegelicus made during this scene. At line 279, when Orestes has recovered from his fit of insanity, he says, I can see the calm after the storm. But the Greek word calm sounds very similar to the word weasel. Hegelicus got the accent wrong. Thus, what the audience heard was, I can see the weasel after the storm. The actor never lived it down. Comedians years later were still making fun of his pronunciation. I guess the moral of this story is there are two ways to go down in history. One is to do something magnificently wonderful, and the other is to screw up so egregiously horrible that no one will let you forget it. And they have the same effect. There's an Egyptian guy, Ea Nasir. And the only reason we know the existence of Ea Nasir is we have a long letter to him complaining that he sells substandard copper. That his copper really stinks. And it's a complaint letter from a customer. This is all we know. He sells bad copper. This is why history knows him, the guy who sells bad copper. Hegelicus is the guy who said, I can see the weasel after the storm.
It's so weird how Greek words are so closely related, like how you can just guess and then you get totally
A completely different word.
That's weird.
Desert and dessert.
Yeah.
I don't want to have some dessert after my dinner. But I would like to wander around in a dessert. Sounds fun. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Trying to bring some laughter into this very cold January day. Let's look at Medea. There's not a lot to laugh about in Medea, is there? No. I'm reading about Rome, doing some making one of these for next year, okay? And reading stuff. I've read the stuff you're going to read, but now I'm reading stuff you're not going to read. Anyway, I wrote a biography of Cicero, and when Cicero was being followed, you know, he got on the hit list by Mark Antony and Octavius, Augustus, who's going to be Augustus later, who's going to die, and Cicero's one of them. And they're following him. The thing he had that he was reading in the litter as they were carrying him to run away was Medea. This is the last thing Cicero chose to read. Cicero. I mean, he didn't know it was going to be the last thing he was going to read, granted. But he did choose this play to read as he was trying to escape the assassins who eventually caught up with him. Anyway.
There are assassins coming after me.
Give me my copy of Medea and let's go. I wanted to remind everyone, we're going to talk, we're not going to spend a lot of time. I feel like this play is pretty straightforward. I mean, we could spend hours probably digging into it, you know, that you want to. But Corinth, these people are from Corinth. This is happening in Corinth. In 431, when this play was produced, Corinth was the enemy. Corinth was the enemy in the Peloponnesian War. I mean, Sparta is one enemy, but which you are going to start reading about this coming week. We're going to start reading the Peloponnesian War, and you're going to hear more about Corinth's part. So let's just actually go straight. I'm just going to zip around in this play because I'm assuming everybody knows what happened in the play. It's pretty straightforward. Aegeus comes from Athens and makes a pit stop there, right? And Medea says, they're kicking me out. I need a place to go. Can I come to Athens? And sure, swear it. Swear that no matter what happens, because of course she knows what she's planning to do, no matter what happens, you will take me in. Done. The audience watching this play is Athens. Athens used to be, think about it, Athens was the one who brought justice to Orestes. Athens was the one who welcomed Oedipus and gave him a home after his long wanderings. Now Athens is the one who lets Medea in. Because the king's too stupid to wait and see. Should I let her in? She already has a history. It's not good. And they welcomed her from Corinth. Remember I told you Euripides is that cynical, the Athens my fathers knew is not my Athens. The Greece my fathers knew is not my Greece. That heroic generation, sort of like we think of the World War II vets. The greatest generation. For them, that was the Marathon and Salamis people, all right? But they're all dead. Or they're very elderly. And things have changed in Greece. And this is representation of that. So just imagine that you're sitting, Athens. Do you let Medea in? We used to be the arbiters of justice. Does Medea ever have to pay the piper for what she did, as far as you see? She gets off scot-free everything she does, right? She doesn't get punished by her father for killing her brother. They get thrown out of wherever town it was where she had Peleus kill his daughters, killed him to make him young again. But she never gets punished. This is another, I'm skipping around. I might have asked you this question. Oh yeah, this was the top, this is the question I asked at the top, page 76. I'm sorry to mix it around. What is the role of the gods in this play? Yes. Which is kind of an abuse, that's sort of a heretical, if you can have pagan heresy, use of the gods, swear by the gods that you'll let me in no matter what I do, even if I kill my own children. I mean, look at the family killings that have happened in all the stories previous to this. And there's always been a bill that comes due, and you got to pay it, right, later? Except for Medea, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's the end right there. It's like many matters that God brings to private end. The end.
Yes.
What?
Apparently, that was a stock ending for Euripides, that last section. He ended his plays that way a lot because that's the way they ended. And they got into the flying chariot and left. And Athena came and just told them what to do. And it's not very satisfying.
The gods don't even actually show up. It's just like, yeah, the gods do stuff. Yeah.
And they don't, this is not fair to say this because this is the only Euripides play you've read, but when the gods do that, they show up and they fix it and they leave.
So it's like deism.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going for, Alex. They don't care. They're not present. So, like or hate them in the Iliad and the Odyssey, they're at least attentive. Sometimes you wish they were less attentive. Odysseus wished they were less attentive. Poseidon, just go back to your party with the Ethiopians or whatever, and let me get home. The gods are paying attention. Oh, it's time for so-and-so to die. Sarpedon, my son, is going to die. I'm sad. Oh, should we save Patroclus? I don't know. But the gods, and I just have to trust me that this is similar to his other plays. They just aren't active anymore. They've withdrawn, and it's all on us. They're there, maybe, hopefully, but we got to deal with this ourselves until they just step in, randomly. In this case, they don't. In this case, Medea is the Deus Ex Machina, the chariot, the fact that she has a chariot traditionally drawn by dragons, which is never a good thing. Don't ever trust anyone if they show up in a chariot drawn by dragons. But no, the gods have disappeared. So let's go back here in order a little better. The nurse in the opening speech of the play describes Medea as her heart unhinged in her love for Jason. What has she already done? Before the play happened. Okay. Yes. Well, is there anything also, even outside of this particular story, that Medea, we talked about earlier, that Medea has actions she has performed for Jason? Okay, yes. So, I mean, I agree totally with what you said, but even bigger. She has committed multiple murders for Jason, and that seems unhinged to me. I feel like if you were ever in a relationship that leads you to murder, get out of that relationship immediately. I don't have to tell any of you that.
Well, oh wait, wasn't she like struck by Cupid's arrow?
Well, that's what they say. I don't know. I think that you're right, because Aphrodite was helping Jason.
So it's that naked baby boy's fault that we were not.
Or his mom's.
Yeah.
Of course, you wonder how much Cupid's arrows change your character. I mean, not everybody who falls in love starts killing people. Do you know what I mean? One would think you had something rotten in there before anything started. But yes, the nurse describes her as her heart unhinged in her love for Jason. And then her nurse goes on to say, but she hates her children and feels no joy in seeing them. I am afraid that she may be planning something we do not expect. Her temperament is dangerous and will not tolerate bad treatment. Yes, I think. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. I expect. That's good. I fear. What does she say? I am afraid that she may be planning something we do not expect. But yes, if you're afraid it's going to happen, one would think to some extent you do expect it. So, no hidden secrets in this play, right? Oedipus had hidden secrets. They weren't hidden from the audience, because when I went to see that play, I would know this story already. I already know this story when I show up in Athens and I see this play. But it's not even hidden from the characters. I don't like the way she's looking at the kids. I think something bad's going to happen, like right at the very first speech. Notice that this lady is just the nurse. Remember we talked about Euripides like to throw common people in and give them big speeches and big moments in the play. So the kid's tutor comes in with the kids, and the nurse says to them, "Oh, children, do you hear how your father is behaving towards you? Curse him. But no, he is my master, yet he stands plainly convicted of being a traitor to his friends." And the tutor answers this, "But is anyone different? Are you only now realizing that everyone loves himself more than his neighbor? Some justifiably, others simply to improve their situation, seeing that their father no longer loves these children because of his new marriage? Did you not get the memo that everyone is out for themselves? I know. Everyone just does what is good for them. You just waking up to that? This is a hard, cold, cynical reality world that Euripides paints for us. We do what we can get away with. And we do what will be for our own advantage. Oedipus, for all his problems, bless his heart, thought he was doing a good thing. He's ferreting out Laius's killer, and he's going to save Thebes. He saved Thebes once before. He's going to save it from the plague. It's sympathetic. Do you feel sorry for Jason at all in this play? I know. It's brutal. And even Medea is at that point, I told you I was going to jump around, and I'm going to do it. Towards the end, when she's getting ready to kill them, she's not, now I'm going to march in there and go do it. She is of two minds. Okay. But what is wrong with me? Do I want to make myself ridiculous by letting my enemies go unpunished? I must face the deed. Shame on my cowardice in even letting my mind dally with these weak thoughts. Go into the house, children. Those for whom it is not right to be present at my sacrifice, that is a matter for them. That line, those for whom it is not right to be present at my sacrifice, that's what you say before a sacrifice in Greece. If there's anyone here impure, unholy, who shouldn't be here, sort of like at a wedding, if there's anyone who objects to the union of these two people, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. That's what they say. She's getting ready to sacrifice them. No, and I'm sure that was that way at sacrifices too. You don't really think anybody's going to say, "Oh, sorry, I did something wrong. I'm going to have to excuse myself from this sacrifice." Probably not. But she gives the formula and she says, "Do not, my heart, do not do this. Let them be, poor heart. Spare the children. Alive with us in Athens, they will make you happy. By the avenging fiends below in Hades, it will never come to pass that I leave my children for my enemies to insult. There's no alternative. They must die, and since they must, I who gave them birth shall kill them. In any case, the thing is done, and the princess will not escape." She is of two minds. She doesn't really want to do this, but she doesn't see another alternative. And then she admits it. My fury against Jason is stronger than my counsels of softness. She's got the proverbial, the wicked, the demon and the angel on the shoulders, Don't do it. You're their mother. Do it. You punish Jason. And the counsels of softness lose out to the counsels of fury. But what does it tell us? That we kind of have moments when we feel, all right, maybe if not sorry for Medea, at least we see her lamenting the situation. I don't really want to do this. And sometimes desperate people don't see very clearly, like they don't see the options available to them. She doesn't see any other options. I mean, there are a few. She's being banished. The kids go with her, or the kids stay behind. If the kids go with her, they're probably going to suffer because they're going to be in need, perhaps, until they get a place in F. They're always going to be without their father. She leaves them behind. She's separated from them permanently. They're not going to have play dates with their mom. It's not going to happen. And of course, after she's killed the princess, there's no going back from that, right? There's one way. They're going to come punish her, she thinks. And either my kids are going to end up with Jason, who I hate, who doesn't appear to care about them. Let's look at Jason's speech. I keep meaning to say something, and I'm going to say it while I look this up. I keep meaning to say, what does it tell us when Jason comes off as a thorough jerk, and the murderess at least has moments where you know that she's lamenting the situation? Jason never, oh, maybe I shouldn't marry that other woman. Yeah, Ethan, what do you want to say? Yes, let's look at that question. Let Alex say his piece, and then we'll look at that. Macbeth. You end up doing it anyway. So let's look at that question. How would you describe the status of Greek women? Ethan just described it by saying they didn't have much of a status at all, right? Greek women were seen and not, well, they weren't seen or heard. Greek women were supposed to stay at home. And I don't mean like a stay-at-home mom that we would think of today. I mean, you don't go out in public without a male escort. It is still debated whether or not women were allowed at all at the theatrical, celebration. But you didn't go out. You were sequestered. And you sent servants out to go do your shopping or whatever. A well-bred Greek woman just did not show herself around. You just were in your own family circle. Yeah, Ethan. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
That's a lot like how Muslims
Yes.
specifically the terrorists who have recently ISIS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Taliban.
Okay, yes. So she says this: of everything that is alive and has a mind, we women are the most wretched creatures. First of all, we have to buy a husband with a vast outlay of money, a dowry. We have to take a master for our body. The latter is still more painful than the former. And here lies the most critical issue, whether we take a good husband or bad. For divorce brings shame on a woman's reputation, and we cannot refuse a husband his rights. We come to new ways of behavior, to new customs, and since we've learnt nothing of such matters at home, we need prophetic powers to tell us specifically what sort of husband we shall have to deal with. And if we manage this well, and our husband lives with us and bears the yoke of marriage lightly, then life is enviable. If not, death would be welcome. As for a man, when he's had enough of life at home, he can stop his heart's sickness by going out to see one of his friends or contemporaries. But we are forced to look to one soul alone. Men say of us that we live a life free from danger at home while they fight wars. How wrong they are. I would rather stand 3 times in the battle line than bear one child. Like, yeah, you want to trade? I'll go hold the shield and spear. You give birth to a baby. Then we'll talk. Yes. This is true. Isolation twists your mind, doesn't it? So Jason shows up and he says, you're a clever woman, but it would be invidious to spell out how love forced you with his inescapable arrows to save me. But I shan't go into that in too much detail. You helped me, and I'm pleased with the result. However, by saving me, you took more than you gave, as I shall tell you. First of all, you live in the land of Greece instead of a barbarian country. You understand the workings of justice and know what it is to live by rule of law and not at the whim of the mighty.
So he just said, well, you saved me, sure, but you were just doing it to get here, where us Greeks are so much better than you barbarians.
That's exactly what he's saying. And you know what? I say you lucked out. You lucked out in the relationship. This is just a winning. You're the winning side. And Medea, guess what? You live in the land of justice. You live in a place for justice, and you just don't have to live by somebody's whim.
Wait a second. Yeah.
Bingo! Hello, Jason. You just had a whim to take a new wife, and you just ruined Medea's life with it. Oh, you don't have to deal with the whim of others. So he goes on. All Greeks saw that you were clever, and you won a reputation. If you were living at the furthest limits of the earth, no one would have heard of you. I, for my part, would not want to have gold in my house or sing a song more beautifully than Orpheus if my good fortune did not become far famed. You're famous here. You're clever. At home, you would have been nobody. He goes on, as for your reproaches against my royal marriage, I shall show you, first of all, that I am sensible to make this match, as well as demonstrating good sense, and in addition, proving a powerful friend to you and my children. And the stage direction says Medea makes a gesture of impatience. No, keep quiet. When I moved here, and he goes on to tell her the story of why he needs to do this and how, oh, I thought he mentioned it here, how people objected to, oh, here's what Medea accuses of him. It wasn't that which stopped you, but your marriage with a barbarian was proving a source of no glory for you as you faced old age. I'll tell you why you're leaving me. It's not because I'm not powerful. It's not because I'm not pretty. It's not because you love her. It's because I'm baggage. Because I'm a foreigner. Greeks don't like foreigners. Medea is so much what we would call the other. She's a sorceress. She's a barbarian woman, and she is just a ball and chain on Jason that he wants to jettison. Medea is so many stories, and it depends on who you ask. This is the story of a woman spurned. This is the story of women's plight in Greece. This is the story of the foreigner who comes to another country and is not welcomed and is held with suspicion. Now, Medea's given him every right to hold her with suspicion. I grant that. But it's also that story. She accuses him, you're jettisoning me because I'm a foreigner. And I'm not good for your career. Yeah, say it.
It's really surprising that Euripides that is the playwright.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so hard.
I know. If you got it wrong, I wouldn't have said
But
anything.
it's really surprising that he even dared to put that in here at that time, because a major shift was going down in Athens.
I'm glad you guys can see that. What did you say, Ethan? Oh, say your point of view. Mm-hmm. Mm. So, Alex, your argument would be it's surprising and shocking because it took boldness to bring these issues to the fore. But you are saying this was already a climate where these issues were circulating, perhaps because of the cynicism of the times, in which he's just giving voice to what people are already thinking and saying. Does that? Mm. Mm-hmm. Right to vote. Mm-hmm. Which is not quite accurate. Kyle, we're going to find out that the Romans, even though the father of the family had ostensibly life and death power over the family, women got away with a lot in Rome. Women's status has risen and fallen in different cultures. But I understand exactly your point. Go ahead. Socrates was killed for having sex.
So, like, and you like just know that idea, and like believe it too. So that's
the best is that you put it into that you put the idea in its life.
Rather than just holding it as a private belief. Okay. What does it say, though, that the woman is Medea? I mean, would it not be a better argument if she were a better human being? Yeah. She's definitely strong, but I don't know if this sheds light on it at all. We're not going to read any of the comedies. There were comedies performed at these two, and the foremost comedian playwright is named Aristophanes. And his plays can be hard to read because they're very topical. It's like if you went to a play and it was making jokes about Biden and Fauci, and you have to look at the footnotes a lot to get it. But a lot of it you can get, okay? And so he was writing during the Peloponnesian War. There is a famous play by Aristophanes called Lysistrata. And Lysistrata is a woman, and she gets together all her friends, her female friends, and they decide the Peloponnesian War just really sucks, basically. This has got to stop. We are all going to band together like a union, and we're going to refuse to sleep with our husbands until they quit the war. We're just packed. And of course, some of them give in. Some are like, I don't know. Do you think we should? And so, but that's the plot of the play. And they basically go to the Areopagus and they take over. The women take over. And the insinuation is if we were running the show, things would be better. So this idea bubbles up and it's a comedy, but it's kind of cutting. Aristophanes was very snarky about the people that he criticized, you know.
It's like making a joke. It might be
yes, but it's still true, depending on how you feel about Biden. So I mean, it definitely, but that's very powerful. That line gets quoted a lot when she says, "I would rather stand in the battle line than give birth to a child." You don't know what it's like, you guys. And that isolation. You don't know what it's like. Plus, so it's strike one. Strike two is, I'm a foreigner. I'm a foreigner, and supposedly this land of justice, of freedom and justice for all, hasn't proven to be a land of, well, in a good way, it hasn't proven to be a land of justice, I guess, because she hasn't gotten punished for all the crud that she's pulled off. But in a bad way, it's not proving to be a land of justice right now because she's just being pushed aside. The other two questions, I guess we really already talked about. Who seems more sympathetically likable? And I would vote Medea. Jason doesn't say anything about his children until he comes at the end and he wants to see them. Oh, my children. And she says, now you want to speak to them and embrace them, then you pushed them away. You were willing to have us all banished. You were never going to see your sons again. I mean, remember, the original plan was I'm going to marry her and I'm going to have more children, and we're all going to be some really big, dysfunctional family, extended family, and I will have new children to grow up with my sons, and you'll have a more secure place and everything. But she bad-mouthed this to the point where she got banished. And at that point, her children are going with her. Jason's not going to see them anymore. She said, you didn't care. You were perfectly willing for them to be sent away. Now you want them. She's very plain. The quote I read before, and I think she says it again, I'm doing this to hurt Jason. The only reason I'm doing this is to hurt Jason. Jason says to her, you loathsome creature, hateful beyond all other women to the gods, to me and to the whole human race. You have had the ruthlessness to drive a sword into the children whom you bore. You have destroyed me and left me childless. You have done these things, and yet you can look upon the sun and earth, you cruel perpetrator of the most unholy of deeds. I'm on page 36, if your book looks like mine, and it's line 1327, 1326, just above 1330. He compares her to Scylla and Charybdis, compares her to monsters. But we never do get to see Jason's other side. If Jason has another side, like the soft side, the tender side, the side that loves his sons until they're dead. And I personally feel swayed towards sympathy for Medea. despite her acts, because Jason's just a cardboard nobody. Oh, absolutely. Hello? Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. I left everything for you. I left everything for you. And there, I burned that bridge. There's no going back. My dad is not going to welcome me home. And of course I'm jealous. I also mentioned how it would feel to be an Athenian in the audience, I think, and see, this is my Athens. This is the home of justice. We welcome Medea and her ilk. No punishment. Yes, Euripides is a very cynical poet. Another play by Aristophanes that's just really very funny. It's called The Frogs, because the frogs are the chorus. The frogs sing things. Anyway, it's the story of Dionysus wishing that he could bring a great playwright back, because all the great playwrights are dead. Euripides was dead, and Aeschylus was dead, and Sophocles. And so he goes to Hades, he dresses up as Hercules, and there's this really funny scene where he knocks on a door on his way to Hades, because Hercules went there to bring back Cerberus once upon a time. He knocks on the door of an inn, and he's dressed up in lion skin, and the guy comes to the door. Oh, last time you were here, you made a mess, and you trashed the place, and you never paid, and I'm going to go get the manager. And Dionysus has a serving guy. He's like, would you like to change clothes with me? So then he changes clothes, and he comes to the door, and he knocks again, and his serving girl comes. He's like, oh, Hercules, I missed you. And Dionysus is like, get out of the way, it's me. They also try to give their baggage to a dead person to take to Hades for them. It's like, we're on the way there, would you just take this? And the guy sits up, the dead guy sits up and says, yeah, I'll do it for, $5, whatever. This is the kind of comedy it is. They go down to Hades and they have a contest between Aeschylus and Euripides. Aeschylus and Sophocles? Anyway, and he mocks the way they do things, but it comes out in this, even though it's comedy, it's very silly. It's very silly. The differences in the attitudes of these playwrights and the different times in which they lived. And Euripides is in this, things are falling apart. And it's an ugly, dark play, yeah.
Recently, I watched the movie King Arthur and the Holy Grail, but it was like that really...
Was it Monty Python?
What?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Yeah.
I know all about this.
It was...
There's some naughty parts. You should ask your parents before you watch it.
But it was, I mean, you know how it's supposed to go, but it's so incredibly silly.
It's very silly.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't have horses, so they have a guy that follows them with coconuts. I actually had a chemistry or a physics question in college. I took physics for stupid people. It was physics for liberal arts majors, It's physics for non-science people. Because my husband said, you should take that. So anyway, one of them was about like a southbound laden sparrow, the speed. It was an extra credit question. So, anyway, it's part of the movie. Yes. My favorite part of that movie is when Michael Palin, who I adore, he's one of the peasants in the land, and he says, "Who are you? I'm the king." He says, "We have no king. We're a democratic, we're a collective, and we all." And then they take away, "Help! Help! I'm being repressed." Okay, let's talk about Poetics by Aristotle instead of reminiscing about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Aristotle, what? I object to that, personally. Okay, so he says, I'm not going to read this whole thing, so just relax, all right? I've got sections underlined in red. Those are the things I want to highlight. He starts out by saying, what is tragedy? So anytime we talk about something, it's good to start with a definition, right? What are we talking about? Tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. And he's going to tell what a certain magnitude means later. With language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, several kinds being found in separate parts of the play, in the form of action, not a narrative, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation of these emotions. This is his famous word, catharsis, purgation of the emotions. We go and we're going to see this happen, and somehow it's going to make us cry. It's going to make us feel upset. It's going to make us feel pity, and it's going to be sort of an emotional cleansing that we feel sometimes when you just have a good cry over something and you just get it out of your system and you feel better. We don't know exactly what Aristotle meant by this, how he thought this happened, and why he thought it was important that we did this on a regular basis. Did he believe that things built up and you needed to get rid of it? Later on he's going to talk about, and we're going to read, things that do that to you. A tragedy has to be of a sort that it will do that to you, or it didn't meet the criterion. He goes on this second paragraph. Tragedy is an imitation, not of men, but of an action and a life. And life consists in action. He's not interested in just the story or the character. He goes on to say, now character determines men's qualities, but it is by their actions that they are happy or the reverse. He thinks the play depends on action. He doesn't want someone to just come up and tell you the story. This isn't story time. I want to see you in action. And he says, a man's character makes him what he is, but his actions make him happy or sad. Think about that related to Oedipus. He is a certain sort, and you know what? At the beginning of the play, he seems like a good sort. We're going to set aside the whole murdering Laius's entourage episode, okay? But he comes and he stands up to the Sphinx. What? Or self-defense. It might have been self-defense.
How does someone accidentally, or even purposefully, just kill an entourage? Be like,
we're gonna overlook that for the time being, and we're gonna say that he stood up to the Sphinx and he took over Thebes when Thebes had lost its king, and when they're being attacked by plague, he says, "I feel your pain. I'm like a father to all of you." I mean, his character seems good. Also, his diligence in examining who is the killer of Laius is to his credit. It's to his downfall. He doesn't know that when he starts it, right? And he wants to know. So we want to see him in action. It's his actions that make him happy or the reverse. Does that make sense? So his character. This isn't a character sketch of Oedipus. I want to see him act, says Aristotle, and I want to see whether he ends up happy or sad, and if it's tragedy, he's going to end up sad. Character comes in as a subsidiary to the actions. Hence, the incidents and the plot are the end of tragedy. He does not mean, we're going to visit this again when we read more Aristotle, end for Aristotle does not mean the finish. It means the goal, the point. So in the Westminster Catechism, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. The chief end of man, the goal, right? So he says the goal is the plot. It's all plot. And if character comes in, I'll see the people's character, what kind of people they are. But plot, he says, is the first principle and soul of tragedy. A well-constructed plot will neither begin nor end at haphazard, but conform to certain principles. Which brings us to a certain magnitude. He says a certain magnitude is necessary. And like Ethan said, because he claims small things aren't beautiful. The idea, he says really small things and really big things aren't beautiful. And we can disagree with that. I'm not, you disagree with me, but we can disagree together with Aristotle. But I think his idea is, unless you can see something as a whole, you can't really judge well of its overall beauty, okay? So poor Mr. Doryphorus, lacking his head, you know, I've done him a disservice because he's not whole anymore. But that every story isn't a whole. And by that I mean, let me see what, quote Aristotle. There are many actions of one man out of which we cannot make one action. His example is Odysseus. Odysseus has all sorts of things in his life. He pretended to be insane, you know, so he wouldn't have to go to the Trojan War. He had a childhood. He has a life after he gets home. Homer cares about none of these things. Homer cares about one thing about Odysseus: getting home. Getting home. The Iliad doesn't tell the story of the Trojan War, does it? He didn't say, I'm going to tell a story. Aristotle, I think, would argue, you can't have a play about the Trojan War. It is too big to be beautiful. It is too big to see all at once. You got to have a story about one thing. Homer wrote about what in the Iliad? Not the whole war. What? Achilles and his anger. And it is a whole, right? He goes from anger, it's the arc of his anger, right? Until at the end Priam comes and they have an understanding and they weep together. And it closes. And it leaves us there. And we want, but what happens next? But for Aristotle, that's a closed story now. The closure of his anger story. Does that make sense? And so, you know, we don't get to hear Oedipus versus the Sphinx. That's a different story. Same guy, different story. Aristotle says a tragedian, a playwright, has to focus on something that's a complete story, that's whole in itself. And he says to center around an action that is, in our sense of the word, one. Odysseus coming home, Achilles being angry, Oedipus finding out who he is. These are one. The structural union of the parts being such that if any one of them is displaced or removed, the whole will be disjointed and disturbed. You include things that are important. And if it's not important, it's not central to this, you can leave it out. You shouldn't have, Aristotle's not a fan of side plots, right? Because it takes away from that central thing. Okay, so the purpose of this, he says, to imitate actions which excite pity and fear. It must not be the spectacle of a virtuous man brought from prosperity to adversity, for this neither moves pity nor fear, it merely shocks us. This is Job. Now, well, it would be Job if the end of Job didn't exist and he didn't get everything back and there were no God involved, okay? Just the idea, a virtuous man brought to adversity. Aristotle says nobody wants to see that. A purely angelically virtuous man brought to adversity, that's just shocking. We don't want to see that. He says, nor again that of a bad man passing from adversity to prosperity. We don't want to see the villain do well. That's just wrong. Nor again should the downfall of the utter villain be exhibited. We want to see somebody go down, but if he's just a total rotter through and through, we say, you had that coming to you. And we don't feel pity or fear, do we? We just, those are satisfying in another way, right? Think of movies or stories where the bad guy gets it in the end. But he said that's not a tragedy. He says, if we saw a villain go down, it would inspire neither pity nor fear. For pity is aroused by unmerited misfortune, fear by the misfortune of a man like ourselves. We want to see someone, it could be me. That could be me. Oedipus did that stuff he didn't know. Did I do something and I didn't know? I'm afraid. You see, I pity. He says, the good tragedy is a man who is not eminently good or just. He's just an ordinary guy, yet whose misfortune is brought about not by vice or depravity, but some error or frailty. He must be one who is highly renowned and prosperous, a personage like Oedipus, Thyestes, or illustrious men of such families. And then he goes on to say what strikes us as painful or terrible. He said, you know what, if you see enemies kill each other, you say, well, that happens sometimes. If you see friends get at it, you say, oh, that happens occasionally. That's worse. But when you see it in families, think about every single story we've read has been about family, hasn't it? He says, when a brother kills or intends to kill a brother, a son his father, a mother her son, a son his mother, any other deed of this kind, these are the situations to be looked for the poet. It is thus that Euripides makes Medea slay her children. Or again, the deed of horror may be done, but done in ignorance. The Oedipus of Sophocles is an example. For whatever reason, Aristotle thought that these were healthy. This was healthy for human emotions. To see somebody that scared us because they're like us, or somebody who used to be prosperous come down, but not somebody who's totally virtuous come down, because that's just depressing. Somebody who's like us, who makes mistakes. And this time this mistake really brought him down. Thus says Aristotle. And I don't know, I'll have to think on, you can all think on whether you agree with him. This is that leaving it there at that sad ending and weeping with them and mourning with them does anything positive for us. I feel like we're a world that prefers the happy ending. Although we have more and more movies being released that don't end happily, don't we? I mean, maybe you're not familiar. I'm just thinking, I've been watching some Clint Eastwood. My husband likes Westerns, and so I finally watched Pale Rider and, some of these kind of darker Westerns that Clint Eastwood has done in his old age that aren't so clear-cut. The guy in the black hat is the bad guy. And we're going to shoot him down in the middle of the street, and he's going to save the town. The good guy with the white hat is going to save the town. We're blurring those lines. You talked about that a little earlier, Ethan, that we're coming into a cynical time when we're starting to blur those lines, and we have more entertainment in which maybe it doesn't all come out okay. Okay. In the last few minutes we have, I want to get you ready to start reading Thucydides. And on page 79 in your reading guide there, I have a little outline. You can look at it if you want. If you've closed it and put it away, it's fine. I'm going to tell you what's on the outline. What? You loved what? What did you say you loved? Oh, yes. All right, so yes, this is a review for some of you who were in the junior high class last year. I want to fill you in on what happened after the Persian War, very, very briefly and sketchily, and get you ready to read the next big history book we're going to read, which I already told you isn't as long as Herodotus. It's not as convoluted as Herodotus. And keep in mind, it also has, at the top of the page, it has, if it's the landmark Thucydides, it has the year, and it has like 4th year of the war, 5th year of the war, 6th year. So it's very easy to follow with all the maps like the landmark Herodotus had to make it easy to follow. It's going to require slowing down a little bit though. This is totally doable. We're going to read 2 books a week. But remember, a lot of that is pictures and maps. All right? So if you go home and you sit down and see how much of it you read in half an hour. And then you know how many hours you need to spend to get through, because some of the pictures are pages and maps, like I said. But follow the action. It's going to take, okay, I need to think about what's happening. But it has the paragraphs in the margins, all right, the summary of the paragraph. Okay, So after the Persian War, Athens was on top of the world, right? Because they're the kings of the Aegean world. They saved Greece. And as we saw hinted a little bit at the end of Herodotus, and we talked about then, they started collecting money and resources from the people who lived over in Ionia on the coast of Turkey and the islands and Greece to guarantee that they will have resources if the Persians come back. This is a good plan. Some people said, hey, I will volunteer, I will make ships and hand them over. Some people, I will supply men, soldiers. Some people, I'm just giving money. We don't have a lot of men, we don't have a lot of wood for building ships, we'll just give money. And they kept all of this loot, all of the money donated on the island of Delos, in the sort of in the middle, midway between Greece and Turkey. It was sacred to Apollo because Apollo and Artemis were born there, supposedly. And so this was a sacred island. It's sort of like Switzerland, you know. It's always neutral, and they don't fight on Delos. It's just holy ground. Switzerland isn't holy ground, but you know what I mean, that they don't usually take sides. So all was hunky-dory. Obviously the Athenians were definitely in charge of this, but they called it the Delian League, and it was named after the island of Delos where they kept their resources, which is fine until time passes and Naxos and Thasos, two islands, decide that the Delian League is a drain on their resources. You know, we just can't afford this every year. And I realize that if we pull out, we're taking our chances. Sort of like if we all had medical coverage, joint medical coverage, you know, and Kyle decides to just pull out. It's like, well, good luck if you get sick. You do understand that if you pull out, we won't help you if you're sick. It's like, yes, I know, I'll take my chances. Naxos and Thasos said, we'll take our chances, right? We just want to pull out. And Athens said, oh no, there is no pull out plan. In the, do you guys know the song Hotel California by the Eagles? See, now I quote, I'm like I'm so old, like you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. That's the Delian League. You can't leave. And Athens went and sacked their cities. Knocked down walls, burnt down buildings. No, you don't leave. Where's the money? Okay, this was maybe, I don't know if it was clue number one, but it was a big clue that this thing was sort of Athens being a bully and having an empire. In 454, Athens got the great idea that we should just move all that money to Athens. Delos is a long way away, and we're in charge anyway. You know, we make most of the decisions. We have most of the ships, and we have the generals. And if we had access to that money, it would make life a lot easier. So we're just going to move the money, and we'll take care of the money. Don't worry. Yes.
There is a verse in the Bible that says, your heart will be, or
Where your treasure is, there your heart lies also?
yeah, yep, where your treasure is. So that treasure was right by their heart.
Yes.
So you really saw their priorities.
Oh, you saw their priorities. Yeah, Kyle.
So, if they pulled out the Delian League, then Athens, well, they say they couldn't. But basically they pulled out, and then Athens, since they're not part of the Delian League, they started attacking us.
Yeah, it was
And they had to go west, because they're not part of the Delian League. And so
Yes.
they kept the city.
Yes.
So if they did leave, then they got punished for it.
Technically, I guess. On a technicality, yes, yes. Anyway, either way, it didn't turn out well for them. So Athens is now in charge of the money. And this is where the finances are going to come from to rebuild all the buildings on the Acropolis. The Persians destroyed them. So all the Parthenon and all those buildings that we see today, the Persians destroyed the forerunner of buildings. That was all new. And there was an incredible, same time as our Polykleitos and the other artists we've been seeing, an artist named Phidias, who was an architect and an artist and designed many of these buildings and adorned them. We'll be looking at those. Some of our art of the week will be these buildings that were built. Pericles was the leader in Athens. Athens is a democracy, but they have a council, and they had 9 archons. They took turns, like they elected 9 archons every year, and they took turn being the chief archon. So power was spread around. But just like always happens, no matter what kind of government you have, if you have someone who's particularly strong-willed and charismatic and likable, he rises to the top, you know, and that was Pericles. Pericles was a buddy with the artist Phidias, and he organized the rebuilding of the beautiful buildings on the Acropolis. He decided that they should build, so this is my bad drawing. So here's the coast of Greece, and say Athens is here, and they had a harbor here. The harbor is called the Piraeus. All right, and this is 2 or 3 miles away. Yes.
Is this the long wall?
Yes. Yes. So they built a wall, and they built a wall all the way down to the port, so that they could unload supplies, and nobody could cut off their supply chain from their harbor. They just enclosed the whole thing, and yes, they're called the long walls. Very clever, because they're long and they're walls. So I'm not going to tell you, Thucydides is going to tell you how hostilities broke out in the war he's going to describe to you. But they had skirmishes. Sparta had none of this Delian League. We don't trust you, we don't like you, we think the Delian League is a load of hooey. Yes, we're going to have our own league, and it's called the Peloponnesian League, and our mission statement is to mess you up. All right, our job is to keep an eye on you and make sure you stay in your place. That was their job. So that was going on too. The Delian League was cities spread around Greece, but Sparta wasn't one of them, all right? And Sparta had its own allies. So they had gotten into skirmishes previous to Thucydides, what Thucydides is going to write. And then they made a truce. It was supposed to be a 30-year truce. I don't know, it lasted 5 years or something, 10 years. And then hostilities break out again. Now, the first thing the Spartans are going to do is march, you know, this is not to scale, this is the Isthmus of Corinth. So they march across, and they just start burning fields, and they burn farms, all right? So all the people who live on these farms, they come inside the walls, see, and they can just camp out. They've got all this room, and they're inside the walls. It's like medieval people going inside the castle, you know, when the enemy comes. They all go in the castle, but something happens often when people crowd together in small places and sanitation is non-existent. People got sick and plague broke out. So this is the war. So this gives you, I've told you some things that are going to happen. All right, you're going to meet Pericles. Let me tell you who this Thucydides guy is. In your book, I wrote like the book and paragraph where we learn this about him. Thucydides is an Athenian. He's an officer in the Athenian army. He lived through the entire war. He was an adult when it started. He was exiled for 20 years. He lost his command because, because it was up like Thrace. He was supposed to come to the aid of a town that was under attack, and he was delayed through no fault of his own, but he was delayed and he didn't get there in time, and he got fired because he didn't save the town. So he had to leave Athens, but that meant he could just basically hang around Greece and visit cities, and he started writing a history of the war. He could go visit Sparta now. He was exiled. He could go visit and talk to people. And he wrote a war. The book is unfinished. Thucydides died before he got done, but your book has a little postscript that wraps up the war for you, and tells you how it all fell out. And let me just read one last thing, and then I'll let you go, okay? And we're reading books 1 and 2, and you're going to finish your paper this week. This is Aristotle from that same book, Poetics. The distinction between the historian and the poet is not that one writing prose and the other verse. You might put the work of Herodotus into verse, and it would still be a species of history. It consists really in this, that the one describes the thing that has been, and the other a kind of thing that might be. Hence, poetry is something more philosophic and of graver import than history, since its statements are of the nature of universals. Poetry tells us about things that are all times and all places, always true. Those of history are singulars. This thing happened in this place at this time. But I added my own note to this. This is me, not Aristotle now. But Thucydides treats the singulars of history as windows to universals, revealing the general way humans will act under similar circumstances. Thucydides is not just telling you this is what happened in the Peloponnesian War. He's saying this is what happens when we turn the power over to one man. This is what happens when the mob dictates war policy. All right. Okay. First two books. It's not difficult. It's just he will tell you about a lot of places and people, and sometimes it's hard to keep them straight. But use the maps to help you. You just don't use the maps. That's why I wanted you to get this version, so you could see, oh, I see. They attacked this town because it's right next to this town. All right, and then it makes sense? All right, thank you. Sorry I kept you over again. Have a good lunch and have a good week. I'll see you next week.